Hello everyone, and welcome to this latest video in our series, Our Great Awakening. And today our topic is sovereignty. National sovereignty and personal sovereignty. Sovereignty as in freedom. And we spoke about this before in a previous video when we dealt with the 7 Hermetic principles, the 7 Hermetic spiritual laws of the universe. Sovereignty is something that we need to protect, both national sovereignty and personal sovereignty. Declan.
Well, if the road to awakening begins with questions, then I'm going to ask a few questions, Eileen. Do you have personal sovereignty? Do you have freedom in your life? And how much freedom do you actually have? Do you have freedom with your government? Those people that you elect, those people that you put in place to govern, to manage, to take care of the big stuff. Are they actually doing what you tell them, or are they actually taking away your personal freedom? Do you have freedom in finance? When you go out to work every day, bring back money and you put it in the bank, and then you sign up to all kinds of contracts, mortgages. Are you actually working with a fair system? Are you working with a system that allows you freedom? Employment. How much autonomy do you have in your working day? How much input do you have? Can that be structured any differently? Education. In the educational system, there are very strict rules. Is it necessary for those rules to be in place? Is the purpose of education to enlighten or to make us into automatons, into robots? When you get up in the morning and go to work or go to school, how are you controlled? How are you manipulated? With education, the purpose is to make square pegs for round holes. Eileen?
Education, Declan, yes. And when I started my teaching career many years ago now, I was full of enthusiasm about how I was going to change the establishment. I did not realise that the establishment was not for changing. And I now know what I didn't know then. I taught then what I was taught. I taught to a curriculum. I taught to exams. The boys' results were my results. So I fed into the system. As we all do, the system gets us all because we are not free. The establishment is not for changing. The establishment is not for turning. The system gets us all. And I now know that our education systems feed into our left brain, which is the part of our brain that takes in facts, information, learns it off, regurgitates it, produces an exam, and hey presto, we pass. Our right part of our brain, the part that enables us to think and work things out and question, that has been starved. Always has been and still is. And I posted a video last week about education in our present system. And I made the point that it's time for us to take our children out of the full-time classroom situation. They will never learn about life inside in the classroom. Life is out there, as I showed in that story I read from in the video. The child in the forest knew all about life, whereas the ones in the classroom were learning about nouns and adverbs and verbs. Who is the better citizen? Who is the wiser child? We need to reform our education system.
Very true, Eileen. Because we are placed in a position where we are taken from one level of freedom to another, to a level of lesser freedom, in fact. Is that the best way to go about the structure of our society? Our governments are now feeding us misinformation. They are manipulating and controlling us They say we're free, but then they take away those freedoms. And you have to ask, Eileen, whether that was freedom in the first place, if it can be taken away. What's happening now, actually, with the government, is that they are activating a mob mentality. They're turning us against each other for their purposes. Is that freedom? How much freedom do we have in that? Very, very little. Very, very little freedom. With our government, we are in a position that's explained very well by this analogy. There's a man in a cage, in prison, starving. And the man is offered a loaf of bread or a key. And the man takes the bread and does not look at what the key signifies. The key signifies his freedom, that he can go out and make the bread. He can do all that himself. But when you're focused on your basic needs, then you don't think about freedom. If you're worried about your health, if you're fearful of that, then you don't think about your freedom. And that's very much where we're at the moment. We are told that we have freedom. The media, our governments, our spiritual advisors are telling us we have freedom. But we don't. We don't have that freedom to go out and pursue the things that we need to pursue in our lives for the spiritual enrichment. Religion also is a manipulative organization. All these organizations are put in place to take away our freedom. As the Jesuit said, give me a child before the age of 7 and I will give you the adult. What has that got to do with God? What has that got to do with the Spirit? You see, freedom is our default setting. We begin our lives, we come into this world with freedom. But then this world takes it away. And I think now at this particular time, this time of great upheaval, of change, now is the time for a great reset. But a great reset that brings us back to the human heart. But in our family and our relationships, do we allow ourselves that personal freedom? Or are we conscious of what other people think? Are we toeing the line to suit other people and to take away from ourselves? Don't worry about what I'm doing. Worry about why you're worried about what I'm doing. That's personal freedom. And that's the lack of it. So, Eileen.
Thank you, Declan, yes, for that. And on the education theme again, I want to remind you again, as I did before, that Goebbels was Minister of Propaganda in Hitler's regime. Only that was not his official title. His official title was Minister of Education. So propaganda and education, synonymous. We are being brainwashed by our education systems, and we need to change that. Now, our next video in a few days' time will be our last video in this series. And we're going to tie that one in with this one, in that we'll be talking about those two novels, 1984 and Brave New World. And why have we chosen those? Because simply, Declan was talked today to you about how important it is to hold on to our sovereignty, national and personal, our freedom, our rights. And those two novels, each of them is a severe warning about what could happen, not what will happen. They are not accurate prophecies. They are simply warnings about what could happen if we lose or if we allow our sovereignty to be taken from us. And finally, before we leave you today, I'd just like to read you some words of some very important people about how important our sovereignty is. Dr. George Brock Chisholm was the first Director General of WHO, the World Health Organization, from 1948 to 1953. And we all know, the dogs in the street know, there's a big agenda amongst a lot of people in our world for a one world government, globalization. And this is what he said: to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family tradition, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. And in 1974, in an issue of Foreign Relations, that's the publication of the Council on Foreign Relations, a council member said this: the new world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. But in the end, run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. Now, we are in a new kind of warfare today. The old conventional warfare that humankind has always known, weapons and all the rest, that's one thing, yes. But the warfare we're in today is a psychological warfare. Call it World War III if you like. And the sad thing is that most people don't even know they're in a battlefield. We just have to protect our national sovereignty and our personal sovereignty. And Hitler in Mein Kampf, this is what he wrote: the best way to take control over a people and control them utterly is to take a little of their freedom at a time, to erode rights by 1,000 tiny and almost imperceptible reductions. In this way, the people will not see those rights and freedoms being removed until past the point at which these changes cannot be reversed. Now we've got to ask ourselves, how does that apply to our present day situation? So please join us in a few days' time for the final video in this present series, Our Great Awakening. Namaste.
Namaste.